So what do people in Northern Ireland actually do with their active leisure time? That's kind of what we want to address here. And I thought it might be, I'll go over all of these categories in due course, by the way. We're going to look at this in quite a lot of detail. But before we do that, I thought it'd be useful to have a look at this image. This is... This data here is from 2019 to 2020. I'm actually recording this recording in 2020. In fact, it's kind of ironic, really. I'm recording this right at the end of the, well, what I'll refer to now as the first COVID lockdown, which is coming out of that at this very moment. I'm recording this early July 2020. And it's quite interesting to see some of these on these, because it's these exact things that people haven't been doing in recent months. Nevertheless, let's see if we can take a more general picture. But in terms of engaging with active leisure, I mean, we've got a couple of categories here. We've got sport and activity. We've got things like museums. We've got, this is actually the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. I'll come back to that in a second. We've got libraries. We've got the arts. I'm going to go over a couple of other categories as well in due course. But the point I would make there is that the arts is really significant here, guys. If we consider this to be arts and entertainment, okay, we're seeing here from these statistics in from 2019, 2020, that the vast majority of people engage in arts and entertainment at some point. We've got sport. I wonder if you thought that might have been higher compared to the arts, for example. We've got sport, just over half of people who answer this survey. About 1/3 of people who attend museums, about 1/4 of people excuse me, that use libraries and so on. So this gives us a nice picture of how people engage with active leisure. I want to sort of jump to this one here next. I think this is really fascinating, because what we're seeing here is that representation exactly. So just to confirm what we're looking at here, this top line and this 87% in 2020, what we've got here is that we've got people that have engaged in culture and arts. Okay, so we've got here the idea of people who engage in culture and arts. Just underneath that, we've got this 84 here. I'll try and do it in a similar green. This 84 here of people that have engaged in arts by themselves. This blue line here, we've got museums. We've got this purple line here that is represented by libraries. We've got this orange line down here, which is PRONI, the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. Records going back to, I believe it's over 400 years of catalogues of newspapers and articles and public records that people can either visit to look at or access online. So it's quite an interesting one that's considered in here. And then finally, guys, before we look at the teaching aspect of this, I wanted to draw your attention to this. And I think it's quite interesting, because it's saying here, if we take this sport aspect of this, what we're finding here is that just over half of people have participated in some kind of sport in the last year of this survey. Half of them, similar numbers, do so at least one day a week. So this is 1 times a week. Remember that our active figure is meant to be for adults 5 times 30 minutes a week. Not necessarily sport, but a combination of things. But people who are a member of sports clubs is only 1 in 4 people. Okay, so we've only got 1 in 4 people who are members of sports clubs. So those numbers would seem slightly low, I think. Could we put it that way? But what we want to do within this tutorial, really, where we want to go with this, and I think this is the main aspect of this, is what are the main categories of active leisure? Okay, so if I put in here categories of active leisure, and we've looked at some stats, therefore we've got a bit of an insight, but what do we recognize them to be? So first and foremost, and it's the one that's most utilized, is the arts, and I'm going to refer to it as art and entertainment. Okay, and I don't think this will come as a major shock to you that this is the most popular one, but we're talking about in here things like museums. We looked at those a few moments ago. Things like galleries, things like, let's say, theatres, people attending the theatre. Now again, I repeat, I'm recording this in the sort of the COVID era, so it's kind of weird to be talking about these as normal, but cinemas are good examples. What about things like clubs? What about things like concerts? This is a very clear category of active leisure that people engage in and enjoy engaging in. Now, one we haven't looked at so far is the idea of catering. Okay, catering. So let's have a look at this. We're talking about people's tendency to engage in pubs and bars. I don't live in Northern Ireland, but where I live in, people engage in those things quite a bit. We're talking about restaurants. Okay, people enjoying, attending restaurants. We're talking about cafes. We're talking about fast food outlets. So again, I would say that these are amongst very popular pursuits within society. Okay, we didn't have them on our stats a moment ago, but they're very, very significant. Another one we didn't have on there was the category of home-based active leisure. So home-based. Now, interestingly, one of the ones that would be considered home-based is libraries. Why? Presumably because we're bringing those books, those magazines, those DVDs, whatever it is that we're borrowing home and enjoying them in that space. We could also be talking about something like computer gaming, whether that's console based or whether you're streaming via Stadia with Google or whatever it happens to be. And I have to admit, this one made me laugh a little bit. DVD rental. I'm not sure anyone does that anymore, but maybe the equivalent these days is something such as downloading or renting a video from Apple or from Amazon or from wherever it happens to be. That's an interesting one for you to consider. 2 to go here. Clearly, for us as kind of sports scientist type people, we're interested in sports and physical recreation. Sports and physical recreation. And within this category of active leisure, we're talking about sports centres. I talk quite a bit to you guys about your local leisure centre, for example. What about things like sports clubs, probably run by volunteers in many cases? What about things such as health clubs, may well be privately run? For example, we've got health clubs in there. What about things almost certainly private? What about things like spas? And again, we've got some stats on those that we've just looked at previously. And to finish off with, guys, we've got the notion of hospitality. Okay, so hospitality. Now, this has got nothing to do with hospitals. Hospitality is about looking after people, or caring for them, not in the medical sense, but putting them up, if you see what I mean. So this includes things such as hotels. It includes things such as B&Bs. It includes things such as hostels. Again, remember the difference between a hostel and a hotel. Really, hostels tend to be much lower priced, and hostels also tend to be sort of shared rooms. So those things combine, obviously. And we could be talking about things like campsites. So these are our categories of active leisure. I'll just repeat what I said a few moments ago. I happen to be recording this in this kind of COVID pandemic moment. I hope that when you take this video, all of that stuff is over. I'm going to assume it is. But just realise that as of this moment when I record that is not available. Okay, this is not available. This is not available. This is, and this one here has not been available. So you can see the kind of impact that that this particular, I don't mean to teach about COVID, it's not really for us to consider, but you see the sort of impact that this pandemic has had on the active leisure industry. It's not an uninteresting way to actually look at this section, to realise that these categories of active leisure during this health crisis, and again I repeat, I really hope it's over by the time you take this tutorial, but you can see here that these things have really suffered. Probably the only one that's benefited here, and of course within that, libraries have been closed even. So quite fascinating, really.